Greetings, all you wonderful people. Before I launch into my weekly monologue, I just want to give you a quick reminder to check out my patreon.com site. It's by joining my patreon.com site and parting with a little bit of cash on a monthly or an annual basis that you meaningfully, in the real world, support this channel. Plus, it's a great site. You get early access to new content. There's an exclusive question and answer chat every week. Anyway, it'd be lovely to see you there. Okay, now it's time for this week's rant. This week, I was reminded on multiple fronts, really, of other people's pain. You know, so much pain, so many people. How did that come about? Well, Trudy and my wife and I, we asked our two eldest children to take on a job that we'd been sort of aware of but hadn't confronted. And it was to sort out and file all the letters and parcels and mementos and gifts that have found their way to me during the last... Well, since 2020, all those pieces of mail famously famously arrived here at our house, even though they didn't have my real address. Just, descriptions, really. Descriptions of me and countless variations thereof. Look, hang on. This is one box. This is part of 2 months worth of letters from, I think, 2021. Okay, this is the product of what the kids were doing. This is what we got them to do. So they had it was all in baskets and cardboard boxes and whatnot, all stored. But we got them to go through it properly and put everything in order and put in month order and year order and so on, because it had got out of control. You know, there's thousands of bits of mail. So they were rereading them. In fact, they were reading them for the first time, because when some of those letters arrived, they were a bit younger and we didn't really involve them in the contents, but they did. They filed them. Reread them, filed them, and they're there for future reference, because I do regard them as an utterly unique and priceless and irreplaceable record of an unforgettable time. And you know, I've been going through them. For example, you know, Janelle Oliver, YouTube personality and truth seeker Stirling, right? That's dated the 19th of December 2021. It's a Christmas card. Part of what was really overwhelming was that at Christmas, all these cards came, you know, to us, to me and the family, from people we don't know or didn't know, and that they were taking time to write to us. And this one, get this, is from... It's from, my name is Liam and I am 16 years old. 16-year-old from Mayo, Ireland. The first time I saw you was in the COVID nightmare video on the GB News YouTube channel. And I thought it was incredible because I felt the exact same as you did. And it was amazing to see someone speaking out against it. My extended family has become very divided by the vaccines, and my uncle doesn't want to speak to me anymore because I'm not vaccinated. And I feel really angry at the Irish government because they're really making our society very divided over this, and it's really worrying. My biggest fear is that Ireland implements a vaccine mandate like Germany and Austria do, but I really hope that doesn't happen. I just want to wish you and your family a good Christmas. You know, I thank you for all you've done, because every time you're live on GBE News, I always watch. You know, just from a 16-year-old worried. Why should a 16-year-old in Ireland be worrying about these kinds of things? It wasn't right. And then, you know, this is... Well, I won't give any names away, but you know, this is Sometimes I felt close to despair at what's happening because most of the people I know have bought into the official narrative without questioning any of it. Um, the virus never frightened me. There is a pandemic. It's a pandemic of lies. Those in charge are treating the rest of us with contempt. As you pointed out last week, isn't it strange that there are parties in Downing Street at a time when the virus was apparently posing such a threat to life that the population was being put into lockdown and told to stay away from each other? I asked my MP to imagine how people like me who were bereaved during lockdown feel when they hear about those parties attended by those who imposed such inhumane restrictions on the rest of us. I asked him to imagine how it feels to sit at home alone, choosing a coffin from an online catalogue because family, friends, and undertakers were following orders and stayed away to stay safe. I'm beyond angry. I'm totally sickened. Is another Christmas card. I found this year emotionally tough, as have my children and other family and friends. As we head into deep winter, it's comforting to know I'm not alone with my thoughts, as there are so many who feel the same. I attended the London March yesterday. This is the 19th of the 12th, 2021. It was uplifting and so friendly. I'm not brave enough to post the pictures I took on my Instagram, as some people are still very hostile. As I write this, I know later today I'll be surrounded by my family. I'm having a cheese and wine party. There will be love and laughter all around as young and old enjoy being together. I'll raise a toast to you. And then lastly, out of this sample, I write to you again as a way of pouring out my horror. I don't know how else to put it. I'm just devastated at the vote today. I think that's the vote about cancelling Christmas. I really hoped sense and decency would prevail. I watched the scenes of police brutality to the elderly, or a person failing to wear a mask. What on earth is going on? What is this crazy desire to get everyone vaccinated with a booster that doesn't work? I can see my colleagues, friends and family falling ill, not only from COVID, but from so many other things. Healthy, fit young people. I'm really worried about what the vaccine has done to millions of people's immune systems. This is in 2021. I feel alone, on the edge of society, impossible to have a healthy conversation with anyone, as once they have had the vaccine, they cannot bear to listen to an alternative view, and of course, there's no going back. You know, I say that these letters are unforgettable, or that they're a record of an unforgettable time. And by that, what I mean most sincerely is that time must never be forgotten. Never. That's the Christmas of 2021 I was reading from there. And it's too easy, really, to forget how much pain was in those letters. And that was just the letters that those people wrote to me, which was just a sample of what was out there. And we must never forget how much needless harm was caused to so many people, still being caused to so many people. Those letters are full of pain, and they're full of disbelief, and they're full of despair. And our children going through them all again brought a lot of that back to the surface, and rightly so. You know, it was right to be for the wounds to be made fresh again. And also this week, I got an email from a dear friend in Australia, a guy that I worked with making television, and we've stayed in touch, and we stayed in touch through the lockdown and everything that happened in Australia. And it's it's just his most recent email, but it's a lament for Australia. It's filled with grief about how the place he was born and raised in let him down. And that's it in a nutshell. You know, he was let down by his homeland. And to quote him, people like us are the frogs that have jumped out of the pot, and we're yelling at the others to do the same. I am still, on a daily basis, using whatever rhetoric I can to wake the minds of my peers. If I can influence 1 in 500, I'm happy. I will not let these years and damage go. I will not let these years and damage go. You know, hear to that. And I've read his email over and over. There was something about this one that really struck me. as having within it a recognition of something profound, which is the inclination out there, if not the determination out there, to forget and to move on, to put it all behind us. Just a week or so ago, I quoted Hannah Arendt, the German-American author, who watched the trial of the Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann, and she described the banality of evil. And I think putting the events, the crimes of the past few years behind us without first confronting them and tackling the perpetrators is another banal evil. And then I was sent a clip of some of the testimony given at the Scottish COVID inquiry, specifically in relation to what happened to elderly people in Scottish care homes during the time of lockdown. And, I hold my hands up and say I haven't previously covered the Scottish COVID inquiry, or indeed any of the COVID inquiry in England either. And I feel very bad about this. By not covering the inquiry, I've fallen for some of the same evil spell cast by those who would have us put it all behind us and move on. And I can only explain it by saying that I expected in advance that the inquiries would only whitewash history. But because of that, I didn't take the time to listen to what was said by real people suffering real pain, more of the same pain that was in the letters that came to me. And I'll play some of the testimony now, along with statements made by some of the lawyers, the King's counsels involved in the proceedings, representing some of the people.
The inquiry must investigate whether the right to life under Article 2 was respected and protected. We anticipate the inquiry will hear that people were pressured to agree to do not resuscitate notices, that people were not resuscitated even though no such notice was in place, that residents may have been neglected and left to starve, that families are not sure they were told the truth about their relative's cause of death, that the usual process for certification of deaths was departed from. The inquiry must investigate potential violations of Article 3, the prohibition on torture, inhuman and degrading treatment. Relatives will speak of their loved ones lacking food, water and hygiene, that there was inadequate, inappropriate, absent or delayed medical attention, that welfare attorneys' views were not listened to when it came to medical treatment, that there was inadequate staffing to provide proper care, resulting in residents suffering unnecessarily. The inquiry will hear that when relatives tried to contact their loved ones by video conference or telephone, their efforts were thwarted. Excuses were given about malfunctioning iPads, problems with the Wi-Fi network. The excuses kept changing. In some instances, management told staff not to share with the outside world what was going on in a home. Families' calls went unanswered over days and sometimes weeks. On some occasions when contact was made, families were treated with disdain as if they were an inconvenience. Families were told their loved one was fine, only to get a sudden, hurried phone call that they were dying. Many families witnessed remotely a significant deterioration of their loved one's physical and mental health in lockdown that was nothing to do with COVID-19. Some suspected their loved one was suffering from neglect, dehydration and starvation. Questions were asked and relatives were fobbed off. The blanket ban on visits meant that care plans could not be checked. The inquiry will hear that when records were requested after a loved one's death, relatives found that the records were missing or incomplete. When relatives did manage to make contact over video with their loved one and witness for themselves the deterioration in their condition, there is evidence that at times their wishes about medical treatment were ignored or overridden.
Words like shielding and protection, which sound very soft and we're looking after you, whereas the harsh reality was people were just shut off and isolated.
Was there a difference between the language and the reality?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Paragraph 110. There should be consequences.
Yes.
Of these window visits, I mean, there was just nothing compassionate about them. And the fact that people had to wear masks and a closed window. And I mean, I always used to say, if you put your dog in, I like dogs, if you put your dog in quarantine and then said to the owner, well, you can go and wave and knock at the window so that your dog can see you, but you're not allowed to go in, would people not say, well, that's pretty cruel? Well, to my mind, that's what they did to human beings.
You know, they're in a care home, some have medical conditions, most had dementia, but they were essentially people with needs who needed support, and that could be seen. That to me was just, nobody had looked at the whole aspect of just living your daily life. Everything was around this pandemic and there was chaos everywhere. Everybody just seemed to be frightened or looking beyond what was actually an individual sitting in front of you. Nobody seemed to recognise that these were individuals with needs, and it wasn't rocket science. We didn't need yes, we had to be careful, but what we really needed was what was in here, that empathy, that understanding, that ability to listen and to make a decision. And I felt strongly that the common sense went out the window and everybody just went by what was being instructed.
Tell me about the testing regime in the care home.
There was no tests available, I understand, at that time. I'm personally not convinced my mum had COVID.
The consultant told me that COVID did not kill Craig, but resulted in his death. Had he been able to assess an optician and have an examination that he normally would have done pre-COVID, he could have been saved. He would have had another operation and he would still be living today. We want answers. My family and thousands of other families want the government to be held accountable for their incompetence, their ignorance and their disrespect to all those that died. They weren't just a number, but they were treated as a statistic. They were our life, they were our family, they were human beings, and they seemed to forget that. Their bodies were just discarded like toxic waste.
I find this hard to watch. I find it even harder to believe. But I do believe it. It really happened. Those people are telling the truth. And the scandal of the care homes is just part of the much bigger scandal, the global scandal of the years just past. You know, look here, look at these people and listen to some of what happened. A tiny fragment of what was done. But heartbreaking, harrowing, shocking, devastating stuff. And what does this say about our society, our civilization? This happened, these things were done to some of the most vulnerable in our communities. Out of sight and out of mind of most of us. But this was done in 21st century Britain. And, you know, also this week, the mainstream media was filling again with warnings about bird flu. You know, bird flu spreading to cattle in the United States of America. And warnings about it jumping from cattle to people. And then, you know, the big one jumping from person to person. They're talking about this again. They're frightening people with this notion again. The scientists, remember them, are apparently already making noises about what must be done. It's interesting, isn't it, at a time when the powers that be are getting very unhappy about poor people eating meat, anybody eating meat except them, and threatening about how cows are the end of the world because they eat grass and fart. It's interesting, isn't it, that along with a pandemic to frighten people, there's an excuse to cull the cattle. Wow, that's convenient, is it not? But suffice it to say that what's out there again already has all the ingredients of the next scamdemic. Here comes the fear porn, and with it will come the excuse to do again all that was done before. And I, for one, will not countenance for so much as a moment the suggestion of a repeat of any of it. And I will not stop asking questions about what happened last time, that we are being invited to forget and to forgive, and from which to move on, almost as though it never happened. And at the same time, every day we see the authorities moving heaven and earth to silence dissent, to demonise contrary points of view. The threat to freedom posed by the digital archipelago built of digital IDs and central bank digital currencies and social credit systems looms larger every day. Never mind bird flu and cattle. Pay attention to what's being erected around us. What really matters. Scamdemics may come and go, and the forever war will move from one place to the next, but the digital archipelago is everywhere and forever. According to the authorities in the United States, to suspect the presence of a centralising entity, a one-world government, if you will, is to be anti-Semitic. I say the way things are going, a charge of anti-Semitism will shortly be levelled at anyone challenging the authorities anywhere for any reason. But I digress. What I meant to talk about this week is the pain of real people. Thousands of whom have written to me, just to me. Heaven knows what all the other millions did with their pain. It's real people talking in this video from the Scottish COVID inquiry. It's just 15 minutes in its entirety. It's a compilation, really, and we'll attach the link to the whole piece. You can watch the whole thing without me getting in the way if you want. And yet their testimony is being memory holed even as I speak. It's not out there. This content is not on the mainstream media. And, I'm doing what I can by paying attention to it here. If we forgive and forget what was done in the name of the science, what happened to millions of people. My house is full of them, full of their letters, just some of them. If we forget what was done in the name of the science, and if we forget what happened to millions of people on account of lockdown, what happened to millions of people who trusted authority enough to submit to an unnecessary medical intervention, if we forget the round-the-clock fear porn, the round-the-clock vilification of those who wouldn't cooperate, vilification that went all the way to violence that was celebrated by some, if we forget the images of policemen in riot gear throttling young women for peacefully protesting, if we forget all this, as we are evidently being encouraged to do, if we forget it without demanding accountability, far less consequences, if we forget and move on, the next thing we will hear will be the padlock on our digital cage clicking shut for the last time.